Welcome to Media Mac. Dr. Shermack here. So glad to have you joining us here. We are in week 5 of our summer session. So if you're in the class, I'm sure you're preparing for this final 2 weeks that we have of class. And this is a big episode today, and you can make a really strong argument that this might be the most important episode of the term. Now, maybe I say that every time, I don't know, but it sure feels important. And we have a 2-chapter week, chapters 14 and chapters 16. And I kind of want to put those together under one roof because chapter 14 is called Journalism, Values, and Democracy. Well, chapter 16 gets into the more legal stuff, First Amendment, libel, that sort of thing. And you know, those might sound like different subjects, but they really are not. They're really the same story from maybe a couple different directions. The connection I want to make here is something that's really important to acknowledge, and I think it's really important for us in the journalism community to acknowledge. Americans don't trust the news anymore. It's a truth. I come on here every week almost as a podcast, and I talk about journalism and media. And I know at times I can sound like a bit of a Pollyanna because I love it so much and it's my life's work. It's my life's passion. But there is no doubt about it that there is a severe trust issue when it comes to journalism and media today. And I think a lot of people don't realize maybe how we got here, and maybe more importantly, what that distrust costs them. And that's really going to be the focus of the episode today. And, you know, this isn't just a hunch. There are numbers out there to back this up. Gallup, which does polling, they ask every year about how much trust people have in the mass media in order for them to report the news fully and accurately. This past fall, the answer was 28%. Sit with that for a moment. 28%, that's the lowest number they have ever recorded. And it's the first time that it ever has dropped below 30. In the 1970s, by comparison, that number was in the low 70s. 7 in 10 Americans now say they have not much confidence in the news or none at all. Not much or none at all. Pew Research, you know, if you're a former student of mine, you know how much I love Pew. I used to do some work for Pew. Pew asks the question a little bit differently, but finds the same sentiment. Trust in national news organization is around 56%. And during one point last year, 2025, it fell 11 points. Now, I think something that's good, and you know that I am a literal champion for local news. That sounded conceited. I didn't mean for that to sound conceited. I'm just in a program with the Center for Community News that they call Faculty Champions, and I am one of those champions. I'm not bragging about an award that I won, but it's my thing. And I love it. And so I'm sharing that with you. Local news is doing better. Local news is about 70%, but that's also falling. This one gets me the most, maybe. Americans under 30, which is a good majority of my students, certainly not all. Americans under 30 now trust information from social media just about as much as they trust national news. That is scarier than hell to me, quite frankly. That means that people are trusting some post from their crazy uncle as much as they're trusting a post from the New York Times. That's problematic. It's a coin flip, 50% versus 51, social media to news. So why does all this matter in a journalism class? Well, chapter 14 certainly makes that case, and I believe it as much as anything, which is journalism and democracy are the same. A democracy runs on information, someone has to go get that information, check it, and deliver it to you so you can make a decision. And when you stop trusting the people who are delivering that information, this whole system starts to get a little wonky and unsure. Check this out. The press is the only profession that is named in the U.S. Constitution. Not lawyers, not doctors, not even soldiers. The press. Think about that. The people who wrote a document, they had just fought a war against a government that controlled what you can read and what a reporter could write. They wanted the press protected. That is not an accident. In many ways, it is a warning that they left for us, perhaps for this moment right now. The job of a journalist in a democracy is a watchdog. The press watches the power so you can do your thing. And you don't have to go sit in every one of those meetings yourself. This is at a national level, federal, is at a local level, all across the board, state. When a democracy starts to slide, that watchdog is one of the first things to go. In the spring, I had my good friend and colleague, Zach Gass, on the show. Some of you at Cuesta may know Professor Gass. He teaches political science. And I need to give him a hat tip here because he laid out what he called a 5-step playbook for how you take apart the free press. And I keep thinking about this almost every day, and I'm into this. I follow it a lot. But what he said really stuck with me. 5 steps, all right? The first step is to make the press the enemy. You go out of your way to call journalists corrupt, fake, unpatriotic, dangerous. You get people to dismiss the reporting before they even read it. How do I know this is real? I've been called a hack. I've been called fake, right? And I'm a journalist. I teach journalism. I also work at KCBX. Second step, you build friendly media that loves you. It's not about censoring outlets that you don't like. You can do that too. It's about amplifying the ones that you do. Make your side louder. And who's doing this? I'm talking about politicians, leaders. Step 3 is using regulation. There's a lot of regulation in this country. FCC, we've talked about this on episodes of this podcast before, using licenses, rules, all that boring kind of background machinery that you hear about. It matters. You make it really easy for outlets that are friendly to you to get what they need, and you make it hard for the ones who are asking some of these uncomfortable questions. I'm going to dig into this one even deeper in segment 2. Step 4, intimidate and harass reporters. You don't come in and take the rights away necessarily. You just make people more afraid to use them, make it harder. It's a chilling effect there. And step 5, I think, is the most concerning because it's the one I see the most, is you encourage people to give up on the idea of truth, that no truth exists. I don't believe anything I read. They've heard everything is fake for so long that they stop believing anything. And when nobody believes anything, you can't hold anyone accountable. If this is all news to you, if this list sounds unfamiliar, or you're like, what the hell is Chermak talking about? You are not paying enough attention. And I could bring all of that back under one umbrella phrase, and that is fake news. I hate the term fake news. Okay? The truth is there is actual fake news out there, news that is literally false, and that is a very serious thing. But the term has been used now in not only media circles, but just in every other circle for anything that anybody does not want to hear. Your friend tells you something you don't like, that's fake news. When everything is fake, then nothing is true. And that's the point of the whole exercise. Think about the people who are really saying this, the people who really matter. Professor Gass brought up on that episode something called byproduct theory. It's a theory from political science, and I'm borrowing it a bit here because it's really important. Most people do not learn about politics on purpose. They learn about it by accident, from scrolling, or when something just kind of floats past them somewhere. There's a term for it more on our journalistic side when we talk about research. It's way less fancy. It's called stumble upon news. So this is, you're scrolling your timeline, man, you're hoping for a sweet cat video, or what's going on with Tay-Tay and Travis, if that's your jam. But you end up stumbling upon some kind of politics. We are counting on our algorithm to deliver us the news. And guess what? The algorithm has no interest in democracy. Algorithm don't care. I should make a t-shirt. It's not trying to make you an informed citizen. The only thing that algorithm is trying to do is to get you to keep scrolling in order to sell you an ad. So what's the fix here? Stop being so accidental. Be intentional. We hear this all the time in other parts of life. I'm intentional about my eating. I'm intentional about my sleep. I'm intentional about my exercise. Be intentional about your information. Go get the news on purpose. Download a news app. One of the things that always strikes me is when I get in a ride share, and I'm from the Midwest, so I can have a conversation with a tree, and I usually will start talking to the driver or whatever. It passes the time. It's lovely. I like people most of the time. And they always ask me, what do you do? What do you do? And I'll tell them I'm a professor. And they'll ask me what I teach, and I'd say journalism. Oh, boy. Well, this day and age, journalism. All the time. And Professor Gass, my friend, we've talked about this many times, because when he says he teaches politics, of course people say, oh, this day and age politics. I push back on that a little bit because I don't know if the people saying these things know what the heck they're talking about. Because usually they follow it with a statement like, I don't believe anything I read. And, oh, they're just out there for the money. And they're just out there. I don't know what this impression is, who this person is, but he's the guy that apparently talks to me when I'm in a ride share. It's just this little litmus test for me to kind of gauge how people feel about journalism in this country when I introduce myself and talk to people about what I do. It's rarely positive. And if you're a journalism student out there, you're probably hearing the same thing. Why would you major in that? So it's something to think about. And today's episode is really what we're going to look at the current state of play, the legal mechanisms in place, why these things matter. It's an important episode. It's an important week. Make sure you're doing the reading. Those are two great chapters, 14 and 16, in the book. Let's do this. Let's take a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dig in. We're going to start with some of the legal stuff. First Amendment, libel. And there's one story happening right now that is kind of part of this playbook I just mentioned, occurring in real time. All right? So come back with us from the break. This is Media Mac. I'm Dr. Shermack. We will be right back.
Stay connected to your campus. The Questonian has been Cuesta College's trusted news source since 1966. From breaking news to campus life, we cover the stories that matter to you. Follow us at The Questonian on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, or visit questonian.com.
Welcome back to Media Mac. Dr. Shermack here. Segment 2 of today's episode, and chapter 16 in our book is called Legal Controls and Freedom of Expression. It's a big chapter, it's super important, but let's start right at the beginning, and that is the First Amendment. Most people don't have this memorized. I don't expect you to, but it's a super important 45 words that you should have some familiarity with as an American, and certainly if you're someone interested in anything in the realm of communications or journalism. I even have it posted on the hanging on the wall in the newsroom for the Questonian on the Cuesta campus. Come on by, room 6111, if you ever want to check it out. It says, and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." 45 words. But they give us 5 freedoms: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. These are cornerstones of democracy, and of course they're going to show up on a quiz or an exam. But there it is again. The press is the only profession in the whole document, and that's where it shows up. 2 major cases have kind of built the modern version of press freedom, and you will read about these in the text, but I want to go over them because I think they're so important. The first one is related to what's known as the Pentagon Papers in 1971. There was a military analyst named Daniel Ellsberg. He leaked a massive classified history of the Vietnam War to the New York Times. I mean, it proved that the government had been lying to the public for years about how the war was going. The Times started publishing it, and the Nixon administration went bananas, and they go to court to try to stop them. It's called prior restraint. That's what they were trying to do. The government is trying to block publication before it happens. And this is important. This happens all the way down to student newspapers all the time. It happens with individual sources. It's super problematic. This case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the court ends up siding with the New York Times and thus journalists, and says the Times can print it without repercussions because no prior restraint. In this country, the government generally cannot tell a newspaper to shut up before it prints. The bar to do that is really sky high, and that's a good thing. So that's the Pentagon Papers. The second case to mention, and this one is super important to you as a student, is Tinker versus Des Moines in 1969. All right. Let's set it up here. A few students wear black armbands to the school to protest the Vietnam War. The school suspends them for doing that. And the students sue, saying that they have been, their First Amendment rights have been violated, the right to protest. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the students win. And one of the most important lines from that case that is super applicable to what we do at Cuesta and every other school does is that your free speech does not stop at the schoolhouse gate. It has limits, But if you write for the student newspaper, whether it's here at Cuesta, and I hope you do, or anywhere, the Tinker case is behind you. And it's particularly strong in California, where the state of California has an additional freedom of press, freedom of student press rights baked right into our education code. A lot of people don't realize that, including many, many administrators. Now, the First Amendment is strong, and we reference it all the time, but it's not a force field. Okay? It doesn't protect every single thing. Obscenity is a great example. It has a very narrow legal definition, and it's not the same thing as something that's quote unquote offensive, but that's limited. Something known as incitement to imminent lawless action is not protected free speech. So that's like the old fire in a crowded theater thing. If you yell that and everyone runs through the door and people trample one another, a bunch of people die, you can't say, well, free speech, I yelled fire. That's not how that works. And the big one, of course, for working journalists is defamation. And that brings us to libel. So libel is a word people throw around when they're angry at the press. And most of the time they have no idea what it means. I've, as an advisor, as a journalist myself, been around long enough to have experienced this. That when someone doesn't like what you wrote, the first thing is out of their mouth is, I'm going to sue you. And what they're trying to do is libel. And most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, there is no case. Because the bar for libel, fortunately in this country, at least for now, is still very high. And good journalism clears this bar every single day. So what is the bar and what is libel? Libel is a false statement presented as fact that is published or broadcast that damages someone's reputation. You hear libel and slander put together. Libel is written, slander is spoken. Same thing, just kind of a different form. There's a 4-part test for libel, and all 4 of these have to be true. Not 2, not 3, all 4. One of them, the first one we'll go through. A false statement that is presented as fact. Opinion is not libel. If you read The Questonian, and you should, at The Questonian on social media, www.questonian.com, you'll notice that we very clearly, almost yelling at you, label our opinion pieces opinion at the beginning. So there's no mistaking what is opinion and what is not. If you go on Rate My Professor and you say, Shermack sucks, that is your opinion, and I welcome you to do that. I can't sue you for that. I hope you don't say that. I hope you like me, but not everyone does. But if I go out, or let's say a reporter goes out from the Questonian and says someone embezzled money from financial aid, and that's a fact, and that actually is false, now there's a problem, right? So opinion is not libel. That's something really important to mention. The second test is it has to be published. Okay, it has to be published somewhere, and that could be on a podcast. It could be in a newspaper article printed. It could be a newspaper article on a website, on social media, a tweet, a Facebook post, you name it. It's got to be out there. The third test, there has to be evidence that it really damaged a person's reputation. Something that you can demonstrate in court. Show me the documents, show me the numbers, something like that. Very tangible. And then 4, and this one is a really good thing for journalists, is that it was made with negligence, or what they call actual malice. All right. I want to explain that one in terms of a case, and I think it's probably the most important libel case in American history. New York Times versus Sullivan, 1964. So what happened here is that the New York Times ran an ad from civil rights advocates that criticized how the police department in Montgomery, Alabama treated protesters. And some of the small details in that ad were wrong. They were flat out wrong. So a police commissioner named Sullivan, that's where Sullivan comes from here, he sued the New York Times for libel. And an Alabama jury hit the Times for $500,000, which 1964 was an absolute fortune. I mean, if that ruling stands, the Times is done. And every newspaper in the country is suddenly scared to cover anybody. So it's appealed and it goes to the Supreme Court, and the court later reverses it unanimously. And with that, they build a new standard for public officials and any other public figure later on. You cannot win a libel case unless you can prove actual malice. So what do we mean by actual malice? Because Times versus Sullivan is where actual malice came from. That doesn't mean that the reporter was mean to you. It means one of two things. Either they knew the statement was false and published it anyway, or they published it with reckless disregard for whether it was true. Now, that sounds kind of like the same thing, and it sort of is. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. The bar is very high on purpose. Because if this were easy, every politician in the country would sue every reporter who covered them, and there'd be no watchdog function. People couldn't afford to be a journalist. This is a massive deal. How does this play out in real life? Let's look at two recent cases. Sarah Palin versus the New York Times. You might remember Sarah Palin. I can see Alaska from my backyard, vice presidential candidate when she ran with John McCain. She sued the New York Times in 2017. She sued the New York Times over a 2017 editorial that incorrectly connected her to a mass shooting in Arizona. It was, unfortunately, there's so many of these. It was one of the more famous ones because that's the one where the politician Gabby Giffords was shot and survived. And the New York Times made an error, no doubt. And they corrected it within hours. Palin sued them anyway. The Times won the case. You had a situation where you had a public figure. There was an honest mistake in the reporting. It was corrected quickly. And there was no evidence along the way that anyone knew it was false. It was an error. And that's exactly the way the system was supposed to work. You have another case, more recent, Dominion versus Fox News. This is a big one. So after the 2020 election, Fox aired false claims about Dominion voting machines. Okay, Dominion is a company that makes these voting machines, the software that runs them, so on and so forth. And they claimed all these things about Dominion that weren't good, that they were, hackable and that it was rigged and it changed the outcome of the election, of course. Well, the big difference with this case is that there were internal messages from Fox News that showed that the hosts and producers knew the claims were false and ran them anyway. Let me say that again a little louder for the kids in the back and the boomers in the back who use Fox News as their truth about the world. Internal Fox messages showed that the hosts and producers knew the claims were false and ran them anyway. That is actual malice in plain sight. Fox knew they were screwed. So what did they do? They settled $787 million settlement. $787 million settlement. They were $787 million guilty It's the largest defamation settlement in American history. If you knowingly publish something that's false, the system will eventually catch up with you. And this is the part that kills me about the fake news. The quote unquote fake news, where people say everything's fake and I don't know what to believe. If everything was fake, there is a system in place where people would be sued up and down. You don't think that a politician is chomping at the bit to sue the pants off of a journalist in this country? Have you heard the way journalists are referred to? Fake news can be weeded out. It happened at Fox News. Maybe what's more troubling about any of this is that the Sullivan case is under pressure in the Supreme Court right now. A couple of justices have said publicly that they want to revisit the standard. If Sullivan gets weakened, political journalism in this country will blow up. Super important. Keep an eye on the Sullivan case. Another thing that's happening in this country right now related to regulation and laws. Step 3 in the playbook I mentioned earlier. In the spring, the FCC ordered an early license renewal review for a batch of ABC stations. ABC out of LA was one of them. ABC 7 out of Chicago in the market that I grew up in was one of them. ABC out of New York. They ordered a review of them 2 years ahead of schedule, which has never happened before. Because why would it? Understand that every broadcast station operates on a license from the FCC because they're using public airwaves. And those come up for renewal on a set schedule. They put ABC's ahead because the administration did not like the content, particularly Jimmy Kimmel. If you remember the Jimmy Kimmel controversy. It's not a sexy story. Licenses and renewals, I get it. But this is using regulation as a weapon. Think of it what you want. Take a look at the issue what you want. But it should be alarming. Because it's happening right now. Okay, let's take a break. Let's come back with segment 3. And it's kind of a strange topic and something that is probably the newest topic that we'll discuss. AI and the First Amendment. Does a machine have free speech rights? Stick around. This is Media Mac. I'm Dr. Shermack. We'll be right back.
Want real journalism experience? Join the Questonian. Build your portfolio, develop professional skills, and tell the stories that matter to our campus. Enroll in JOUR 202 or 203 for 4 credits. Questions? Email thequestonian@questa.edu. The Questonian. Your story starts here.
Welcome back to Media Mac. We're on to segment 3, our final segment of the show today. We're talking about press law, press freedom, the First Amendment. In the last segment, I want to get into something that's like not even in your textbook because it sounds sci-fi, but it's something I think we really need to discuss. And it's just moving so fast, it's hard to even keep it up with it in a print textbook. Think about this. The First Amendment was written in 1791 with quill pens in print shops with handset type, old school, right? And in 2026, we're asking a question the framers couldn't probably have even dreamed up. Does artificial intelligence have free speech rights? It sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's actually in the courts right now. Let me give you a summary. So the AI company out there known as Anthropic, they are the makers of Claude. Some of you may have used Claude. And they had a contract with the Pentagon that kind of fell apart because Anthropic would not allow their system to be used for two things that the Pentagon wanted to use it for: autonomous weapons and mass domestic surveillance of Americans without warrants. I want to say that again. Okay? Anthropic, the AI company that was working with the Pentagon, would not allow the Pentagon to use AI, their AI, for autonomous weapons and mass domestic surveillance of Americans without warrants. Autonomous weapons and mass domestic surveillance of Americans without warrants. Just sitting here as an American dude, as a citizen, that concerns me greatly. Okay? The First Amendment stuff, yeah. But the fact that the Pentagon wanted to use them for those two things is alarming. But I digress. Anthropic said, no way. You're not going to use our AI technology for those things. And the administration, the current administration, was not happy. So unhappy that they had the Pentagon label Anthropic as a supply chain risk. And that's usually a label that is reserved for foreign adversaries. So Anthropic sued. And I think their argument is maybe the most interesting part of this whole thing. They said that this is a First Amendment retaliation, that the government is punishing them for something they said they would not do, for their morals, for their beliefs. A federal judge right here in California actually agreed, and she granted a preliminary injunction. So we have a court treating an AI company's decision about its own technology as protected speech. It's both super fascinating and also super scary. I think maybe the bigger question here is if you ask a chatbot, like an AI-driven chatbot, something and it answers, is that answer protected speech? There already is kind of a real argument out there that it is. The Supreme Court has already protected speech that does not come from a person. Corporate speech, anonymous speech, fictional speech. Even interactive content on video games that gets produced during the course of play is protected. It comes from a 2011 case known as Brown versus the Entertainment Merchants Association, EMA. There's nothing in the First Amendment that says speech it protects has to come from a human. All it cares about is that something is communicated. And the part that I kind of keep going back to, that I probably think about way too much because I'm a nerd, is the First Amendment protects your right to speak. It also protects your right to receive information. So, I know in my comm class, for example, I show in the very first week a little model of communication, and we build on it. It's a simple one. Basic, right? Sender, message, receiver. Sender transmits the message to the receiver. Both ends of that model are protected by the First Amendment. There's a 1976 case that is actually being referenced now. Virginia Pharmacy. It has to do with drug prescription prices. And it basically said that the government can't hold that information from them. That's also a First Amendment issue. So where it applies today, and this is a little wonky, I get it, but it says if you ask AI for medical or legal information and the government tries to block that, you can make a constitutional claim, a First Amendment claim. The right to receive information is yours. I think that's really interesting, something to watch with AI. So anyway, I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole. Maybe I already have, but how does any of this land with journalism? There's this real fight right now inside the profession about AI right now. And look, I can tell you from personal experience, one thing that comes to mind right away is I went to a journalism conference in San Francisco. I was talking to a former Washington Post reporter who still knows a lot of people there, who still knows a lot of people in the industry. And she told me that students need to learn AI. They need to be ready to use AI. That's what she is hearing, and I am hearing from others inside the industry. And then when I come back to the newsroom and talk to students and say, hey, y'all need to learn AI, I get ick. No, thank you. So it's tough because I want you to be prepared. That's my number one job. But there's a lot of resistance to AI. How is AI being handled in journalism? How is AI being used in ways that are both not so great, but also pretty good? Some examples out there right now, ProPublica, which is a nonprofit investigative outlet that I respect tremendously. They're in a fight with their own union over AI. How to disclose that AI is being used in a piece, making sure humans stay in the workflow when AI is involved, no AI-driven layoffs. And people are intense about it. They've gone as far as authorizing a strike over this issue. If that happens, it would be the first journalism strike in this country with AI right at the center. Another example is the Cleveland Plain Dealer. They ran articles where they said very clearly that reporters did the interviews and took the notes, but then they took those notes and fed them to AI, and AI wrote the story. A human edited it, but the writing, the choice of what is the lead, what matters, the structure, that was all machine made. You can probably guess my thoughts. And if you can't, I'll say this. Not good. We've seen many times that AI is pretty bad at journalism. Here's a weird twist, though. Researchers found that Americans want newsrooms to disclose when they use AI, and I think that's a really good practice. Transparency all day. But what's interesting is that when a newsroom does disclose that they use AI, research has found that readers trust the story less, not more. So journalists are doing something that they say, oh, well, if we're more transparent, they'll trust us more, which is what we've always learned, what we've always taught. But in the case of AI, it's not true. They're disclosing and losing trust. If you hide it, that you use AI, but you don't say that you did, then you're going to lose more trust if that gets out. There's just no clean answer right now with AI. I'm still figuring it out on my own. It's tough. So there's a lot to unpack here. The bottom line is this. What the law protects and what is good for journalism sometimes are two different conversations. AI is probably going to get, or maybe already has, some First Amendment protection, but that doesn't really tell you if it's good for journalism, right? The job is still doing the reporting, showing up, reading the room, being in that room, asking the follow-up questions. A machine cannot do that. It can imitate somebody that can, but it can't make you into that person. And that's what this major, this class, that's what this all is for. And that kind of circles us back to the beginning where we talked about trust. The way you build trust is by doing the hard reporting. It is not taking the shortcut with AI. even though it is a tool that I think can assist you in that process. But building the trust means going out and doing the work, pounding the pavement, being in the room, demonstrating what you can do. That's the whole job here. And it's the only way forward in this profession. I've given you a lot to think about this week as you do the work and as we walk through discussion. As I mentioned at the outset, we have 2 chapters, chapter 14, chapter 16. There is a discussion board per usual. Initial post on Thursday, replies by Sunday. Same move we've been making all summer. We also have another Read and React this week, which I think is interesting as well. And don't forget, next week, week 6 is our final week. That means final exam. I have a preparation page in the week 5 module that will help you get ready for that. Don't wait until the last day. Get ready for that, prepare for it, and we'll go from there. I hope I gave you something to think about this week. And if you have any questions, of course, reach out. Use that Ask Me Anything board. But I really appreciate you joining and listening in. I'm Dr. Shermack. This has been Media Mac. Take care of yourself and those around you. So long, everybody.